So probably one of the most important features that we need to be able to understand and recognise on a river when we're reading a river is a stopper. They're probably the feature that give paddlers the most trouble when they're trying to run down a river. It will probably stop you, it might capsize you, and it can make your life pretty hard when you're trying to run down a rapid. So we're going to go into a bit of detail about some of the features of a stopper and how we can recognise safe ones from hazardous ones, and also understand what the impact of that stopper might be on our kayak. So in our Whitewater skills course, we've got various lessons on paddling through stoppers, the technique we need to use to help us punch through stoppers, and also how to get out of stoppers if we find ourselves stuck in one sideways. In this lesson, what we want to look at is more about reading a stopper and understanding how a stopper is going to impact our kayak.
So in this course, we're using the term stopper. However, there are other words to describe the same feature where water turns back on itself and heads back upstream. It could be called a hole or a hydraulic or even a pour over. A hole and a hydraulic are effectively the same thing as a stopper, just different words. However, a pour over is a specific type of stopper, maybe where the flow of water coming into the stopper is quite steep, where it's pouring over a rock or a boulder. So just remember, there are different words that we can use to describe a stopper. So let's start off by looking at the difference between deep recirculating stoppers and surface stoppers. So let's now have a look at a deep recirculating stopper. These are quite hard to understand what's going on when you look at them from the side of the river. So what we're going to do is look at a cross section of a textbook example of a deep recirculating stopper. Now, for this sort of feature, what we're looking for is that the water is going to be coming in at quite a steep angle over a rock or a ledge or a man-made feature. When the water flows over that rock or ledge, it goes deep towards the bed of the river. And then once it's gone to the bed of the river and it flows along, it's going to come back up to the surface and create what we call a boil line or a boil. Then, once the water's at the surface, depending on which side of that boil line it is, it's either going to travel back towards the feature or off downriver. So everything from the one side of the boil line is going to travel back towards the feature across the surface of the water. So you've got that retention. That's what we call our towback. And then everything below that is going to flow off downriver and not hold us there. When we drop into one of these features, with the buoyancy of our kayak, we'll find that we'll get held in position by that towback, always pushing us back upstream into the fold and hold us there. We'd have to get past that boil line to be able to carry on down the river. And this is critical, so by being able to identify that boil line and how much retention there is and how big that towback is critical. If we look at what the water's doing, it's going deep under the surface of the water, it's coming up to the surface of the boil line, and then at the surface it's travelling back towards the feature. Now in a kayak we're going to get a lot of buoyancy, so we're going to be held and be at the surface, so in that area where the water's flowing back towards the fold line of the stopper. If we end up taking a swim because we're stuck in this stopper, we've still got a bit of buoyancy in our buoyancy aid and maybe our dry suit, but we might find that we'll get that flow that's going out downstream, deeper under the surface, will take us past the boil line when we surface and we'll head off downriver. The real dangerous deep recirculating stoppers are when we're out of our kayak and we're swimming, but there's still enough buoyancy in our buoyancy aid and our dry suit to keep us on that surface flow that's going back upstream. So we end up in this continuous recirculation. So being able to identify a feature that's going to hold us in a kayak is one thing, and then also be aware of any feature that would also hold us if we ended up taking a swim. These are the ones that we've really got to watch out for and be able to identify. So we couldn't find any volunteers to jump into a deep recirculating stopper, but we did find some plastic and some rubbish in this one here, where you can see that it's being pushed under the water by the water flowing into the stopper, and then it's resurfacing within the towback area and then being pushed back upstream and then back into the flow coming into the stopper again, recirculating round and round. We're showing you man-made examples here in flood because these are clear examples of the deep recirculating stopper. A natural feature on a river is often a bit more confused and maybe not a completely clean deep recirculating stopper. Like this one, which is big enough and powerful enough to hold a boat when it's the right way up, and also if someone's upside down, it still has enough retention, enough towback to hold someone when they're still in their boat. However, if you were to take a swim in this stopper, you'd end up catching the water at the bottom of the river and being washed out. So let's now have a look at a surface stopper. This is where all the action is happening at the surface. We don't have that deep recirculating stopper action going on. This means they're less retentive. So there's only the boil line, or the area where the water's traveling back upstream, is much closer to the fold line. So you don't have to go far past the feature to be washed out and carry on your journey. So a boat may get held by one of these kind of features with a surface stopper because there's lots of buoyancy and the boat is held on the surface, and that water moving back upstream, or that aerated water, might hold a boat in place. When we were filming for our Whitewater skills course, we found this brilliant surface stopper when we were out in Austria. You can see all the action is happening at the surface. It's quite a foam pile on it, so quite a size, but there is very little or limited towback. It will hold a boat when it's sideways, but if you were to capsize or catch an end slightly, it will wash you off. So if we look at this stopper from above, you can see the towback area is very limited. Just slightly behind the fold of the stopper is the water's travelling back upstream, but below that it's all washing out and on its way. Another consideration when it comes to the towback isn't just the distance and the length of the towback, but also the power of the towback. This is what angle of water is there coming back towards the slot or the fold line of the stopper. So if the boil is quite high, i.e. the water's getting pushed up and there's quite a slope back towards the stopper, that's going to be harder to overcome and get past than if it's absolutely flat. You could find that you'll have a lot more power even with a short towback if it's a steep angle of towback. This is quite hard to spot, but if you can get yourself low to the water, you can also then look at the angle of the towback as well as the distance when you're judging a stopper.
Here behind me, we've got a pretty powerful stopper. That stopper lies at the bottom of the Pontipant Rapid, and whether or not we commit to running the rapid is definitely going to depend on whether we think that stopper is going to be safe for us to run. When I'm evaluating whether a stopper's good to go, I've got to pay real attention to the shape of the stopper, where the exits are, and how powerful I think the hydraulic is. With this stopper here, what I can see is there is a lot of powerful force in the towback of it. I can tell that when I look down at the boils that hit at the base of the fall. What's happening there is that the water is pushing down the ramp, and when it hits the base of the water, it's getting pushed downstream before bubbling up hard to form the boil line and the resurging current, or the towback. If I can figure out, firstly, how long the towback is, so that I know how long of an area it's going to be acting on my boat for when I land, and how powerful that towback is, so I know how hard the tug is going to be, that's a really good start. By judging the distance between where the boils are coming up and where the water is coming down the ramp and meeting the base of the stopper, I can figure out how big the towback area is, okay? If I know how big the towback is, then I'm going to judge it based on boat lengths as to whether or not this is going to be good to go. Now, the stopper behind me has quite a big towback area. I can tell that because when I look at the water that's going in and entering the stopper, it's quite far away from where the water is bubbling up and boiling up to the surface. I would say it's probably a full boat length, depending on the length of your boat, of course. After I've figured out how big the towback area is, and therefore how long a duration it's going to be acting on my boat for, also useful to know how powerful that towback is. And a really good way of judging that is by getting low and getting a sense of the height difference from the base of the fall, where the incoming water meets the hull, and the height at the top of the buoys. That height difference will be plugged by gravity, so the buoy will run downhill back towards the stopper. The greater the height difference between those 2 points, the more powerfully you're going to feel that towback acting upon you. One further thing that I can look at is actually the shape of the stopper, and therefore which side of it to aim for. Is there one side that is sending more water downstream, and is there one side that's sending more water back upstream? I'd always aim for the side that's sending more water downstream, which in this case you can see is the river right hand side closest to me. At that point there's a lot of water surging out. The nearer I am to that point on landing, the more likely I am to come right through my towback area. And if I don't come through that towback area, I end up stuck in a side surf. That's the way that I'm going. I'm going to the weak point.
Y'all ready for this?
Another feature of a stopper that we need to be aware of is its shape. So when we look at it from above, what shape does it form? This will impact how easy it is to get out of it or where the flow might be to escape from a stopper. They're never quite uniform, but we're going to look at some textbook examples to give you an idea of how the water might react and act in different shapes. So let's first consider a closed stopper. This is where we've got a physical barrier, be it a rock or a man-made feature at either end of the stopper. So there's no natural way to get out of the stopper other than through the towback. These are particularly hazardous because we can't use the shape to our advantage. You don't very often find these naturally on a river. There's normally some sort of shape to it. But weirs and man-made features are often closed features, or closed stoppers. And these are particularly hazardous and something we should be aware of. A diagonal stopper is where the stopper isn't perfectly across the river but is diagonal to the river. This will have a natural outflow on the downstream end of the stopper. So if you needed to get out of this, or you needed to run a stopper that's at an angle to the river, it's safer and easier to go to the end of the stopper that is further downstream, because that's where the natural flow is going to be going out of the stopper. Now, you might not get the perfect example like this on a natural river, but if you look at many stoppers, they will be slightly orientated, they can be diagonal to the actual main flow of the river. If you look for this, you can then help pick your line by choosing the end that's more downstream. So the next two shapes to consider are smiling and frowning stoppers. So if we look at them from above and looking downstream, if the shape of the stopper is a smiling face, then it's going to naturally feed a boat or a person swimming towards the outflow of the stopper. Whereas if it's in a frowning shape, the natural flow of the water within the stopper is going to take us back towards the centre and hold us in position. It isn't going to naturally take us out and on our way downstream. So smiling stoppers, when we look at them from above, are going to be kind to us, and then frowning ones we've got to be aware of. They're going to be a little trickier to get out of.
For our Play the River course, we picked a really suitable, friendly stopper to develop our skills in. This was a smiling stopper, so the ends were pointing downstream. This means that all the towbacks are continuously taking you to the edge of the stopper and washing you out of it. So it only takes a couple of strokes to work your way to the edge, and the natural flow of the water downstream at the edges will help you come out of the stopper.
In contrast to that, this stopper is a frowning stopper, where the ends of the stopper point upstream, meaning that you'll always be moved towards the centre of the stopper where the most towback is. This would be a really hard one to work your way out of. If we have a V'd stopper, the natural outflow will often be at the centre of the V, because there's more water being naturally poured in towards that central spot, which will give more of an outflow in that location. You'll find that there's towback on the sides, but in the centre you might notice that the surface of the water is travelling more downstream and is less retentive.
So reading what a stopper's going to do to your kayak is actually quite hard. There's a lot of factors going on here. One of the best ways to really understand how a stopper is going to impact you is by getting in it. Finding a safe stopper, a play stopper like this one, which has got a nice comfortable eddy afterwards, you've got a good safety team on standby, and just feeling and exploring it, finding the easy way out, finding where it's got towback, what you can do in that stopper. And it'll give you a huge amount of confidence when it comes to river running. And it will just give you that extra bit of knowledge about what a stopper might do to your kayak when you're running down a rapid.
We hope this lesson's given you some more information about the hydrodynamics of stoppers to help you read the river and understand some of the features that you're looking at. There are many varieties of stopper and they're never picture perfect, but this information will hopefully allow you to assess them with a little bit more accuracy and judge what they're going to do to you when you're paddling down the river.